Welcome to a new video in my home automation series, and today we are going to review this sofa button X1S Smart Remote, which is a blend between a universal remote and a smart remote. Not really a blend in a way that it combines both of the functionalities. So you might think about it, oh, this is a remote where I can use instead of all my remotes for the TVs, the AV receiver, the set-top box and whatever. But I think it does a lot more than that, because it has some really nice and sophisticated features, which some of them, to be honest, I am not really equipped to show you. I mean, I won't be able to demo it to you, but I can explain you how it works, because I think these features are very powerful. Mostly is that, of course, you can just program different remote controls, so you can just use this single remote control instead of all your different remotes. It has some physical buttons here, so that's a common layout for each of the remotes, and it also has a screen which is a little bit dim. I will move this box out of the way so the camera is going to better expose for that screen. So you can switch between remotes in this single remote, but you can also set up activities where you can combine multiple remotes into one physical remote, or well, specifically to this one. So for example, you can do that. Let's say you want to watch movies, and then obviously you're going to watch the movies on the TV, but then the movies, let's say, is going to come from a set-top box or a streaming device or a Chromecast or from Netflix, and you want to use your AV to listen to the audio. Quite a typical setup. But then if you want to pause the movie or fast forward or do anything with that, you have to use the TV's remote in order to control your TV. But if you want to change the audio, you most probably want to use your AV receiver's remote in order to change the volume level or mute or unmute. But with the sofa button, you can use the single remote. So in these activities, you can configure which buttons are assigned to which devices. So for example, the volume and the mute button is going to send out the volume and the mute signals for your for the AV receiver, and all the other buttons, the usual navigation buttons and colors and these navigation buttons, are going to send out the corresponding signals for the TV. And you can create many of these different activities. So let's say you have an activity where, as I said, you are watching movies from, let's say, a Chromecast or what's the new name for this Google Home, sort of like a dongle device. So you can do that, and then the audio is going to come from the AV, or you can, another source could be like an Apple TV. So in these, you combine all of that, and on top of these, for each of these activities, there are some special functions that you can also set up. So for example, you can tell the remote, or you can program the remote, that whenever you are changing between these activities, it should select the different sources. So let's say one of the your Apple TV is plugged into HDMI 1, the set-top box is plugged into HDMI 2. So when you select the activities, it will automatically select the corresponding input for you. And of course, it can do the same on the let's say on another device for an amp. So if you set up an activity that you want to watch movie and the audio should come from your AV, then it will switch the TV to whatever input that you program to, and also it can switch your AV to go into like a digital input or HDMI in or whatever that you are using to connect the TV and the AV together. So that's really unique functions, not something that I've seen before. And because this is like smart and there is an app, and of course the remote comes with a unit which is going to send out the actual infrared signals, that also means that it is connected to your local network. And you can also create devices which, instead of sending out infrared signals, they also send out HTTP requests. So in my case, what I did is when I, let's say that I want to watch TV, so I configure an activity that I want to, not TV, but movies. I also have an LED strip which is controlled by WLED, and I want that to also automatically come on and start a particular preset. And I could do that with this sofa button as well. So I configured the WLED in order to send out HTTP requests, which then goes to my WLED to turn on lights. And of course, if you don't have lights which use WLED, but you have just, you know, LED strips or other decorative lights that have an infrared remote control, you can do that as well. I have another light which has a normal remote control. I configured it here, and then I can control it. And of course, I can set these up into these sequences as well. You know, turn the TV on, turn it into a specific input channel, turn the AV on, and turn the lights on as well with either infrared or HTTP commands. So a lot of different possibilities, a lot of customizing option, and I think this really makes it as a true universal remote, as in obviously it replaces other remotes, but it can also combine multiple remotes into one for those scenarios where you have, normally you would have, you know, either two, well, most probably two or even three remotes to control things, you know, TV, sound, you know, movie playback and that sort of stuff. So I think this is going to be a fairly long video because there is a lot of things to tell. So definitely use the jump links below in order to get to the sections that you want. So there is going to be an unboxing if you want to see the whole unboxing and everything that comes in a box. And I'm going to go through a, you know, quick, you know, user sort of guide how to use the remote, and we are also going to use the look at the companion app, how to configure these specific functions. And because I use this HTTP function and IoT function as well, I'm also going to quickly go through this WLED integration that I did as an example, and I'm going to show a little bit of Node-RED as well because I use Node-RED in this whole integration and communication. So yeah, there is a lot to cover, so let's get started. Let me just go through the obligatory unboxing because this looks to be like a really nice premium product, and obviously this is the last time I'm going to see this in packaging, so let's do it together. I already removed the film which was covering the box. Oh, there's a little bit of vacuum, so you can see a couple of things here. So yeah, all the things that it's compatible with, and it comes with a hub and an IR blaster and a mobile app and infrared and Bluetooth. And it says 45 days for the working life. That's the battery inside the thing. Because yeah, it runs on battery. I think I already mentioned that, or I will by the time we get to this video. So there is a user manual. It comes in a single language, so you get quite a few stuff, and it's not like, you know, ant letters. Why is the thing with the focus? Yeah, I think this is a really shiny paper, and obviously the camera has issues catching that. But yeah, so yeah, loads of documentation. So that's also nice. And oh, that's the device. Oh yeah. It's very light, to be honest. CE, UK, CA, all the FCC stuff. So you get a nice 4-way D-pad. I think this reflection here is just making my camera go mad all the time. But then you see all these, you know, volume and control button, so like channels and skip and home and back and like channels, and the 4 media buttons. And there is like a scroll wheel. Oops, it's already on. And a nice screen protector. And there is an off button as well. Whee, turning off. Okay. That's really nice. And it's not really a textured back, but it's more like a plastic which has, yeah, you know, it's just not shiny, but it's not the type of plastic. It doesn't feel like the rubbery type of plastic which goes bad in a couple of years. So that's nice. And we have a USB-C on the bottom for charging. So that's the thing, the remote. And we have a quick start guide. And then we have the hub. So this is the guy who is going to send out all the infrared signals. And if I can open this, oh, this is stiff. Yeah, so it's just like a normal thingy with probably a lot of infrared all the way through every single side. I mean, when I say infrared, I mean the infrared LEDs. But let me just unbox this as well. I mean, peel off. Oh, yeah, it's nice. You should either hide it or make sure that you keep this clean and dust free. We get, oh, there is a wall mounting option. So that's nice. I can put it on a wall. And then we have a couple of things here. So 2 connections here. I've already noticed in the documentation, so that's for the IR blasters. And then we have a USB for power and charging, and we have a button. And then that's it. It's a really nice, you know, shiny plastic. I do like it. And yeah, so we have 2 cables, and this must be, yeah, these are the IR blasters. So you can see the small IR diodes on the side at the end, and it comes with a sort of like a very small 3 amp pad, so you can stick it on certain surfaces, and this comes with 2, the other one comes with 1. I wonder if the unit itself has 1 as well. By the time I do a review, I will probably find out. And you have 2 USB ports, the USB cables. So one probably for this power supply, and so yeah, that's the USB-A to USB-C. So that powers this guy. And the other one is again USB-A to USB-C. So this could be a spare to charge this occasionally. And of course, for that you need a separate power supply, or you unplug this one. And just to add it as an optional extra, I started reading the documentation, so I found out that what I mentioned a couple of minutes ago is that this is also an IR blaster, and then you get these additional IR blasters, so 1 here and 2 here in addition. And it really depends on your setup whether you would need to use these or not. So here as an example, they are saying that, let's say you have a TV and you manage to place this, the hub in between, let's say, your TV and the set-top box, then obviously it can shoot the IR signals. But if you want to place it within, let's say, a cabinet, then obviously it cannot be guaranteed that the signal would be able to bounce back to the set-top box, which is in the cabinet. So then in that case, you would use the additional IR blaster. So it looks like that the shiny paper is really not doing good with the camera. And also as a second scenario, let's say you put the hub in the cabinet and then it would, block the signal to the TV. So you can put the IR blasters on the top of the cabinet. So yeah, it's good ideas. I think actually I do have power on the other side of my living room. So I should be able to place it there, and then it should have a direct line of sight to the TV and everything else. So I don't think I would be able to use these, but of course it's nice to have. And yeah, I can always add these if I need to, and then just make sure that everything gets covered with infrared signals. So now that we have done the unboxing, I am using this product, and obviously this part of the video was done weeks after I did the unboxing. And I obviously know a lot more about how this device is used when I obviously unbox it. So let me give you a quick tour in order to really understand how the remote works. I mean, I'm going to focus on the remote because the other box, the hub, is just to send the IR signal. So unlike a normal remote, which has the LEDs to send out the signal, this communicates with the hub and the hub sends out the signal. So you can be, let's say, in another room, or not completely in line of sight to the device that you want to control. It's still going to work. You just have to make sure that the hub and either the hub or the corresponding ER receivers are placed in a way that it can send the signals to all the devices that you want to control. So the remote, as I said, it doesn't have any IRs. It just have a USB-C port where you can charge the internal battery, which lasts a couple of months or 2 months. And it has 2 main interfaces. So you have the top of the remote here, which has this 2-inch LCD screen, which is fairly dim, which is very easy to see by the naked eye, but I just have too much lights in it. That's why it looks like that it's off, but in reality it is on. You can see that it says Xbox, which makes it really good, because even if watching movies, it's not like a glaring screen. And it also has these features that if you're not using for a while, then the screen turns on, and as soon as you pick it up, the screen turns on. And also there is backlight on these buttons, which again, it's really nice to use, and it just fades in as you pick up the remote from the couch. So it's really nice experience. So the top part of the remote is used to either select the devices that you have configured. You can see a number of devices here on the screen of the companion app, or the activities that you have also configured. So I already mentioned what these are, but I'm going to go into the details a little bit later. And so these are sort of like global buttons, and also this thumb wheel is for that. But then the bottom part of the remote are sort of like the local buttons. So these are the buttons that change the behavior depending on either the device that you have selected, or even the activity that you have selected. So obviously, if you selected a TV, it will send out the corresponding TV signals. If you selected an AV, then it will send out the signals for the AV. And you might not configure all of the buttons for all of the devices. So I have, for example, configured a simple LED light, and I think it has a couple of colors. So I configured these for the colors, and I think the plus minus for brightness, and all the other buttons don't really do anything, because it doesn't make sense for that particular light for let's say the play and the home button to do anything. And to be honest, this thumb wheel and these buttons, it needs a little bit getting used to, because they both of them suggest navigation, but obviously you want to use this if you want to, let's say, control the TV, and you want to use these if you want to control the selection on the screen. So again, it needs a little bit of time to get used to. In the meanwhile, I turned off the lamp here, which makes probably this part of the screen a little bit darker and grainy, but it helps me to record the actual screen that on the remote, because as I said, it's not a very bright screen, but it doesn't really have to be. So on the main menu, you have three different things. You have the devices, the activities, you have to use the scroll wheel, and you have the settings. So the settings contain some usual stuff. Most of them are self-explanatory, so we don't have to go there. The first one is the devices. So this is where you can control the various devices. So TCL is my TV, the Sunlight is the LED light, the Hi-Fi is an old Hi-Fi system, which actually that's the only thing which doesn't work. And this WLED, that's the sort of the Node-RED and the HTTP integration that I mentioned in the beginning. And I also configured Xbox. Even though you're not going to do a lot with the Xbox, you can turn it on and off. That's pretty much it. So if you select the device, even if you select the device once, it means that these lower buttons are activated for that specific device. So if I select the TCL now, if I press plus buttons here, then it will send out the signals to the TV to increase the volume, or change channels, or do whatever the corresponding button does. And if you click on that device, you can actually scroll through all the different buttons and infrared signals that particular remote offers. And of course, these are much more than the set of physical buttons that you can configure here. So the idea is that you would obviously configure the buttons that you use the most, as long as they make sense on these physical buttons. But if you want to access anything else, then you still have, you can select this from the list. I mean, it could be a huge list to scroll through, but at least you have the option. I mean, probably the alternative is, if it's a rarely used button, then probably it's just better just to look for the original remote. But the option is here. And I think before we go to the activities, probably I should show you how this is all configured in the apps. So I'm just going to use my phone, and obviously when you do it for the first time, you download this Sofa Button app, you create an account, you have to create an account, and then you click on the plus button, and here, First, you're going to have a plus button, and you can configure your own X1S base station or hub, and then link it to the application. And the process is very straightforward. There is going to be screens on the phone which tell you what to do. You know, plug it in. You have to you press the button for a couple of seconds, and then the phone is going to find the hub, and you will ask to provide your SSID, so the Wi-Fi credentials, and then you are going to be in this screen. And here you can create the devices, and these are going to be the infrared devices. And actually, I did not mention in the beginning, but not only that you can create infrared devices, you can also create Bluetooth devices and Wi-Fi devices. You see some examples here, and RF devices. I mean, I'm going to focus on infrared now because most of the devices that I could test with were infrared, but you know, the options for Bluetooth and the RF is similar, but I would assume that there are going to be much less devices that you can control with Bluetooth and RF. I think most of them are going to be like traditional remote control devices, as in like, TVs and audio equipments and set-top boxes. But for example, lamps that you can, configure either via Bluetooth or RF, and you can combine them into activities. So you set up lighting for a particular scene. So first of all, what I have done is I clicked on plus and I said, I want to create an new infrared device. That's going to be probably the most, straightforward function, or the most used one. And then you can search for models. So the sofa button has like 5,000 different models programmed in. So obviously you first select a brand, and then within that brand, so I have a TCL TV, and it has, as you can see, how many different TVs are listed here. So my TV is probably about 6 or 7 years old, or it could be 10. I wasn't able to find it in this list, so I couldn't find my corresponding model. But as you can see, I mean, even for something, I mean, I don't know how much, how TCL compares to the bigger models like LG, Samsung, or Sony, but still they have loads of stuff. And you can see that they even have user-shared remotes as well. So somebody who didn't find his model here, they created their own remote by learning each of the buttons here, and they can share it. So there is a very good chance that you will find your model here, especially if it's not as old as mine. But if you can't find your model, then you can also learn the device. But before we do that, I also tested this second function, the test the command from cloud. So here again, you select the region. So let's say I'm in the EU and I have a TV, and I have, let's say, a TCL TV. And then here the process is very similar to how I noticed it for many other, these universal remote type of devices, that it has a couple of, remotes, or it knows about a list of different type of remotes for that particular brand and device. And then you can just test them, which one works with your, let's say in this case, the TV. So I don't want to go through this process now because actually my son is using the TV to play Xbox. But let's say that this device knows 6 different remote controls for TCL TVs. So here you press this power button in the middle. So it's going to send out a power signal. If your TV turns on, you find your remote. And if it doesn't it doesn't turn on, then it goes to the next. So it, 2 out of 6, 3 out of 6, and so on. So again, it's very easy to configure a new remote. And then, once the test with the power button works, then the device knows that that's the type of remote, and it will automatically offer all the other functions like, mute and volume and change channels and all the other IR signals that are programmed for that particular remote type, let's say. But even if this fails, but this probably should work 99% of the cases, then you have the sort of like the last resort, which you can see here is learn from infrared remote. So here you select a device type. So TV, set-top boxes, stream boxes, DVD, Blu-rays, projectors, HDMI switches, or others. And for example, I selected these others in order to configure my infrared remote LED light. So there are a couple of questions that you have to answer first. For example, does it have a single power key or a separate on-off key or a power switch? So mine had a separate on-off key, for example, for this remote. Actually, I got the remote for you. So that's the remote for this LED lamp. And for example, you can see that it's unlike like most of the TVs, it has a separate on and on off button. So I was able to configure that here. And then it shows you a bunch of buttons. So these are the buttons that are, physically on the keyboard that you can now learn. And the learning process is also very easy because here you click Add Learn, and then it shows you that you actually have to take your remote and you have to point to the device, the top of the hub, and you have to press the button, and you just wait for a couple of seconds and it says, yeah, I got this signal, and then the signal is learned, and then you can just go to the next one and the next one. And it is also going to have like a test button here, so you can test the IR signal straight away that you learned to the hub, so you can test it immediately. So you configure these buttons, and of course for this particular one, I configured, let's say, power on, power off, and I configured some of these colors. But you can add additional commands here. So let's say if I really like the purple color, I can configure it here. I can also use the remote to teach it, and then it's going to be another command here in the list. And then if I go, I have to learn one key, but I can show you how it looks like in the, let me go back, this sunlight and edit. So once I configured all this, I have all these different options here. So I can, of course, fix any of the commands. So I can trigger it, or I can, edit it, or I can assign commands to different, physical buttons here. So as I said, let's say your remote it has a button which doesn't really correspond to any of these. Or for example, this is not a type of remote that you had to learn manually, but you got them selected from a list. And let's say you don't really use the red button to, for the desired functions, but you want to assign a specific functions to this red button. Let's say, turning on the subtitles or something like that. You can change it here, and then you can select which function to assign to this, physical button, because here you are configuring the physical layout of the remote. So by pressing any of the buttons, which corresponding infrared signals, it should send out to your device. So these are the assigns. And then you have the power settings. And probably this is the most difficult to use or controversial functions of this remote, but not because of the remote, but because how the TVs and most infrared controllable device operate, naming that they don't have a separate on-off buttons. There is one button which turns it off if it's on, or on if it was off. So you can configure here what to do when you select these, or when you select the actual device, you can tell it to turn it on, but then that sort of assumes that the device is always off when you start using it. So you might have to come back to this option a couple of times. Maybe the best is just to use the on no power switch option, so the remote doesn't send a separate on power signal to the device. But it really depends on how you are going to use this remote. So just be aware, or just remember that you have these settings, and then you might have to configure this. And this also comes up when we configure the activities, because the activities, when you launch the activities, it also has the option to send the on signals to the particular device. So let's say you are watching the TV and say, okay, I want to go into the movie mode, which maybe it's a good idea to turn on the AV receiver, but it's probably not a good idea to turn on the TV, because the TV was probably already on, or could have been already on. So then you just turn off your TV. So, unfortunately, TVs don't have separate on-off buttons. And then finally, we have the source configuration, and I'm going to show this how it works on the TV, because obviously it makes more sense on the TV. So here on my TCL TV, in the source configuration. So this is the configuration where you tell the remote how you select different sources on the TV. And of course, that would only make sense if you start using activities. If you're not using activities, it doesn't really make much difference. So the reason you are configuring this, so the remote can switch to the appropriate appropriate sources when you are using, when you are activating that activity, when you are starting that activity. So that my example was that you have an activity which, let's say you want to watch Apple TV and the Apple TV is plugged into HDMI 2, then obviously it will automatically switch to HDMI 2 on the TV. And of course, you can do it on other devices as well. So here on this configuration, you configure whether you need to switch the input or not. Maybe on some other TVs, it would automatically switch to an input because the device got turned on. So I think there are some protocols in HDMI which can do that. So my TV, I need to do that. And so how do you switch input on the TV? Do you have a direct input switching? So it means that you have separate buttons for the various inputs. So most AV receivers, they tend to have buttons like, tuner, CD, AUX or something else, or HDMI 1, HDMI 2, optical input, something like that. So if you have something like that, use that. Or you might have a dedicated source button which brings up a menu, which my TV has. Or you just have a source button and it just toggles through the various inputs. Next. And then you can configure what is the button. So you hear from the list of the buttons that you have configured, or the infrared signals, you select the one which brings up the source menu, and then you have to specify the button which goes where you can go through the navigation or down, and then which one to to confirm. So in my case, again, I have a source button on the remote and I have to use the navigation keys to select input and then click OK to select it. And then I can also list how my inputs are selected in my TV. So my HDMI 1 is actually the T-Home, so that's the set-top box, and the HDMI 2 has the Xbox connected. And I can also configure that when I select the source, does it always shows me the first source, or it defaults to the source that it is selected at the moment. So, the remote knows if it needs to go up or down, or, which way. And also I can select the current source which is configured at the moment when I'm doing all this configuration. So it's a very comprehensive set of functions, especially here. I mean, they have thought about all the different options that exist on TV remotes, on AV remotes. Probably these are the two devices where you are going to actively switch sources a lot. So, and you go through these activities for everything you have. So as you can see, you have Xbox, TCL. So those are my Xbox, my TV. As I said, I have an old, probably like a 15 or maybe 20-year-old Philips mini hi-fi system. I failed to configure that, but even the remote for that is probably broken because I could not train some of the buttons. So I'm just going to ignore this. I just wanted to add it for the sake of completion, because in the normal home theater setup, you probably have a TV, a set-top box, and an AV receiver as well. And I already covered, like a generic remote, how you configure it. As you can see, as I said, I only configured a couple of buttons here. All the other buttons are not working. So if I press this one or that one, it's just not going to send out any signal if this sunlight is selected. And since I'm covering the devices, I want to show you this WLED. So that's the HTTP integration, which I really like. So I definitely want to mention this. But I understand that this is probably not going to be on everyone's radar who are going to buy this device. So if I go plus and I select Wi-Fi, and then here on the bottom of the list, you see this create virtual device from the IP control. I'm going to use this because, as you can see on the top of the screen, it's just going to search for Roku, Philips Hue, or Sonos, which I don't have any of them at my home. But I can create this virtual device. So you can specify the name here for a button. and then a URL. And you can see that you can select the URL to this URL call to be a get, post, or a put. And if you select, let's say, anything else, then you can also select content type and the additional headers and the body. So this is just a regular HTTP call, like a REST API. And then let me show you how this I configured for this LED, WLED. So here I've configured only 4 buttons. So turning the WLED on, off, and selecting 2 different presets that I have already configured. So here, if I do this, if I go into the settings and then I do edit IP command list, so this is the new option, you can see the 4 buttons that I've created, and if I click on new, I get the same screen that I have seen before. So I'm going to show you one that I have created, and in order to turn on my WLED, I can send a very simple command like this, HTTP. The IP address is my IP address for my Node-RED server 1880, and then /sb, that's the endpoint that I've created in Node-RED. And then I send a couple of parameters, like the device should be WLED and the action should be on. And this is a simple GET request. I don't have to maintain any of the screens. And whenever I press this button, it just sends this HTTP request to Node-RED, and then Node-RED controls the WLED. It is possible to control WLED directly with the exact same commands, but for some reason it doesn't work. I think there are probably a couple of factors in play, namely that WLED particularly expects some of the parameters to be in uppercase, and it looks like that it's getting converted to lowercase in the sofa button app. Also, maybe there is no proper response coming back from WLED, so the sofa button just goes into an infinite loop of, it executes the command first time, but it never executes it again. But it works completely in Node-RED. So this could be an issue with the WLED if you have another device that you can control with HTTP, HTTP GET. Maybe it's just going to work fine directly from the sofa button. But since I had Node-RED and I was able to control it, I might just put a very simple flow together. It was literally like 10 minutes to do in Node-RED. But you can see that I have created these very simple buttons, and here in the URLs you can see that it's basically the same, the action is different. So on, off, lake, and green. So that creates, basically triggers 4 different scenes in WLED. And here, when I select assign commands to the remote control, you see that I don't have anything configured here, but I could have configured some of these for the, let's say, the plus and the minus button and some of the colors. So I can actually trigger these, 4 functions for here as well. So you can absolutely do that, but I wanted these comments to be included in some of the scenes already. So, when I go into, let's say, I want to watch movie or I want to play the Xbox, it automatically turns on the WLED and just give a little bit of background light around the TV. So this is very, useful function. I think this opens up a lot of possibilities for integration. And with this, I think I should talk about these activities. So here you see the activities, but before I go there, let me show you how also it works on the remote. So if I go back here and I select the activities, then, well, I only have Xbox configured at the moment. So the idea here is that it turns on the Xbox and it automatically selects the HDMI 2 as the input on the TV. So it switches over to the Xbox. And that's it. I don't have any other options here. I can just press this button, I press the wheel, and then it activates the activity, which again, I don't want to do because my son is playing on the Xbox, so it might just switch something around and we just get a little bit of screaming. So what you do here in the app when you configure a new activity. So first of all, you get a a suggested list of activities, but let's just create a new activity. So let's say that you want to watch movies and you have a setup where you have the TV which is connected to your AV receiver and you want to listen to the music through the AV system. So then you select the TV and you want to select your AV system for this particular activity. And so on the TV, we want to select the input. Well, I mean, it really depends, but let's say you just want to watch TV. Yeah, you want to watch one of your movie channels on the TV, so we don't want to select input. But let's say if your TV comes from a set-top box, you can select to a different, input. But let's just say not to switch inputs. On the hi-fi, you can select the input. So as I said, I don't have the equipment, I don't have the thing connected, but once if you configured your AV receiver correctly, you probably have an input here which corresponds to the input that you connect the TV to the AV. So you would set that. So when you select the activity, it will automatically switch the AV receiver to the correct input. Let me just pick CD, just for the sake of it. And then again, this is the power state confirmation. So that's the thing that, when you select the activity, it will try to turn those devices on and off as well. And, caveat to what I said previously is that this might not work correctly because let's say if the device is already on, it's trying to turn it on, it will switch it off. So you have to come back to this a couple of times and experiment which one works the best in your case. So I think I'm just going to leave this in. So on the TV, it's not going to send anything, and then it's not going to send anything to the hi-fi either. And now you can configure which are the buttons that you want to assign to the various remotes. I think the basic suggestion is also very useful. So let's say that for the the volume buttons, we want to use the AV receiver. And for pretty much everything else, you want to use the TV as a remote. So now it's going to send out, if you press any of these buttons that are highlighted now, the infrared signals for the TV is going to be sent out, and previously for the other three buttons, the infrared signals for the AV receiver is going to be sent out. So it's going to control those devices independently, even though you are using one physical remote. And then you can give it a name, watch TV, and you can give it an icon, and then complete. And then now we just wait because these settings are going to be synced into the remote. And yep, you can see it says syncing. What are you thinking about? It takes a couple of seconds, or maybe a few more seconds. But then we should see, besides the Xbox, there would be a watch TV appearing with the corresponding icon. And by the way, if for some reason this doesn't work, you can always come to this Me option. And I always forget where it is. I think in settings and in sync remote. If you select this, it would resync all the settings to the remote, which if it doesn't work for some reason. I never had any issues with that, but it seems to be taking time for, especially now that I'm making this video. And of course, when I did this previously, the synchronization took me like 10-15 seconds. Now it's taking some more time, but let me just use the Xbox activity to show you some of the additional configuration that you can do. So obviously you would activate this from the remote, and then if you want to change anything, you come to the the mobile app. So if I select the Xbox now, it shows me the the same physical layout that you can see here, and you can activate any of the infrared functions from here. And this is also configured to send most of the buttons to the Xbox and only send the volume buttons to the TV, because I use the TV. So we have a couple of nice functions here. So if you click on repair commands, you have a couple of options. So this is where you can fine tune these power on and power off settings. So if some devices are not turned on, if some devices are not turned off, or some sources are out of order, you can go through. This is sort of like a wizard screen that you can just helps you to configure what what didn't work, and then you can fix it. So yeah, I mean, these are self-explanatory, and as I said, probably you have to spend a little bit of time fine-tuning these, the way you want to use it, and then it's going to work fine. So yeah, I mean, especially these on-off functions are probably the most finicky ones or let's say time-consuming ones to fine-tune them. And then if you go into the edit functions, you can edit, most of these stuff, like you can change the name and then, which devices are assigned. You can also change the buttons that are assigned to these, like you can see that which buttons configure which infrared codes on which device. And you can even configure long presses as well. I haven't done any of these, and it just feels a little bit alien that I can do a short press and a long press on a remote, but I guess it gets a little bit getting used to. And the startup settings, I just jumped one of the things. So the startup settings are automatically populated for you when you configure this activity. When you go through the wizard sections, like, okay, which device I want to turn off, which sources I want to select. So that automatically pre-populates this startup setting, but you can add additional comments. So for example, initially I did not add the WLED to this activity, but I just added it here. So you can see that from the WLED, I select the green button. So this is where it, turns on the Xbox, it switches the TV to the input, and then TCL the input Xbox, and then it sends out the signal to the WLED, so it turns the lights on. You can also add delays between certain functions if you need that. You also have these favorite keys, and I think from here probably the one which is going to be most useful is this add macro keys, because what you can do in these macro keys is you can define a set of button presses that you want to perform. And I mean, I was thinking about what you can use, how you can use these, but I think probably the one thing that I came to my mind is let's say you want to watch sports, or you want to watch TV, but let's say when you want to watch all these in a TV, and in most cases you want to switch between channels because commercials and whatever. So maybe what you can do here is you can configure your favorite TV channels, and then I don't know, whatever, TV channel or, sport channel. And you can add all the additional, you can configure the comments. So let's say you have one of the, the football channel is 115 and the other football channel is 92, and usually flick between these two. You can create them as macro keys. So you just select that, and then it will switch to channel 92, and the other one would switch to channel 115 or whatever, and you can easily switch between the two channels. So this is the use of these macro keys. I couldn't really think about anything else that, any other use. And when you define these macro or favorite keys on the remote, when you select the activities, it says no activities, now it's syncing everything. So when it shows you the activity, like I had the Xbox here, then it's going to show you 3 dots. And then when you click on that, then it's going to give you a list of all these macros. So you can just quickly scroll through them and select them. And yeah, that's also very useful. Again, I don't really watch TVs. I don't do these flicking between channels, but probably that's the one that I would configure this. And you also have some shutdown settings that you can configure. So if you leave the activity, because let's say you select the activity, it can also do a set of functions like turn, as you can see, like I deselect the Xbox activity, so it turns off the Xbox, and then let's say switches back the TV to, well, here it says no switch, but I can also switch the TV back to, let's say, the home screen or my, the default input device or default source. And here I can also like turn on the light if I don't need it anymore. So yeah, there is a lot of configuration options here. And that's it. So this is how you configure your various activities. And yeah, you can have many of these activities, and maybe you have multiple activities which involve the same, devices, let's say the TV and the AV. You just configure them differently. Each of them select different sources, and it makes it easy to switch between this set of activities by one button press on the sofa button, as opposed to using 2 or more remotes, each switching them to different sources and some of the other things that you like to set when you are using let's say the TV for a different type of activity. And finally, let me show you this WLED integration that I did with Node-RED, and how the sofa button sends these HTTP requests to Node-RED. So here I am controlling an LED strip, which is driven by an ESP, and that ESP runs this specific WLED firmware, which is a very common firmware for controlling LED lights. And it has a particular integration built into Node-RED as well, where I can control basically any aspect of the slide. And it looks like it's WLED. I was off for the weekend, and there are a couple of things that I turn off in the house so they don't consume electricity when I'm not at home. So this is why it says disconnected, because I just didn't turn it on since. So this is the whole sofa button integration. And you can see I'm just using standard nodes, nothing really fancy. So it is very easy to use, for this particular application. So if you want to create a new HTTP endpoint in Node-RED, use the MQTT in node, and then use it with the MQTT response. So usually you receive the data in MQTT in, you do something, and then you send the response to the device. And in our case, sofa button doesn't really care what comes back, because it just sends the request, and then it assumes that the other party can process the request and do something, do the things that is needed. So the only thing that sofa button cares about, that there is a valid response from the server. So this is why I am straight piping the data that comes into the MQTT into the MQTT response. And if you remember, the way I've configured these parameters is that the IP colon 1880, which is the port of Node-RED, /SB, which comes here, so /SB, so that's the path to the endpoint. And then in the URL, there was like question mark, device equals something, or device equals WLED, and action equals, let's say, on, off, grid, and lake. I think that was the 4 commands. So all these, when you create an HTTP request with all these request parameters, all this information is included in the data that comes through in the MQTT in node. So all we have to do is, first we have to check which device is being included in the URL. And in the URL that it said question device equals something. So this is getting translated into this message object as message.request.query, because this is a query parameter, and the name of the parameter, which was, let's say, device in this case. And then the value of this device is just WLED. So this is where I typed into all of the URLs that I used. And the only reason I did that, because you might want to control multiple devices from sofa button, so you can use the same endpoint and just use a different device. Let's say device reading lamp, device, I don't know, ceiling lamp, something else, anything that you want to control. And of course you can just list them here and create a new, value, reading lamp. And then you continue the flow exactly the same way as I did here, and send on whatever command that you need to control that device. So now we established that we want to control the WLED, and now we also have to check what actions I specified in the URL. So again, message.request or req.query.action, because it was called action in the URL. And again, I have 4 options: on, off, lake, and green. And in order to control WLED, using this WLED node, I need to send in a data and I need to send in There are a couple of different ways how to do it, but if you want to control more than one thing on the WLED, the best if you send in a JSON format. So here it says, I want to turn it on. So on colon true, so the on property is true, and the BRI, which is for brightness, it's 128, so it's sort of like half brightness. And if I want to turn it off, then on is false. And if I want to turn on the lake effect, then I again says on equals true. I mean, you don't necessarily have to include on in each of them, but I was planning to have one button which turns it on and then turns it into a specific brightness and a preset. And of course, if it's already on, then it just stays on. It doesn't really matter that I'm sending on all the time. So you see on equals true, brightness is 25, and the PS is loading preset. We have to load preset 1. So that's what I've configured in WLED. So preset just loads I think the color wave effect with some orangey and reddish colors. And if I want to use green, then again on true, brightness 128 and preset 2. So that preset loads a different effect and a different set of colors. I think it's much easier to create presets in WLED and then call the presets, as opposed to like specifying the effects and the effect speed and the different colors for the effect, because it's just much easier to do it in the WLED, where you experiment with it, you fine tune it, everything, and you just save it in a preset. You have like 128 presets that you can save anyway. So you configure all of these. It goes into the link node, which then sends the message to this WLED. Well, it sends the message to here, and then it goes into this WLED node, which sends that message out to the WLED, which is configured for this specific IP address. And then it just controls it. It turns it on, it turns it off, it turns the effect to these specific ones that I configured here, and that's it. It was very simple, and that's why I said I probably could have played around with a little bit more how I can control with WLED directly, but it literally took me like 10-15 minutes to put this flow together and test it, and it was working without any issues with Node-RED. And as I said, let's say you want to create multiple devices, you can also have different actions for those devices. Let's say maybe it's a simple lamp, so it only has an on-off action, and then you have to do whatever it takes to control that particular device. If let's say it's an ESP running ESP home, maybe you can send some MQTT commands to that to turn it on and off. Or if you're using MQTT, most probably it's going to be MQTT, but you can also use HTTP commands here as well. There are a lot of different options available in Node-RED how you can do that. So that is the integration that I choose to use for this particular device. But again, I think this virtual device and how you can just send HTTP commands and process them on a third-party device is really powerful, and it just opens up for this device to be able to control so many other things that not just regular infrared remote controllable devices. So as I said, that was a lot, and indeed we covered a lot. So if you like this product, then you will find links in the video description below. I mean, my Node-RED flow was fairly simple. I think it's probably self-explanatory, and it would be easy for you to do the same as well. But if you want my particular flow, just let me know, and I can make that available as well. I think that concludes the review. Thanks for watching, and hopefully see you in the next one.